start the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. Since Sylvia's not here, Greg, if you would be so kind. Please away.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The minutes of May 9th, which was regular meeting. I think everybody was there.
Yes.
Yeah. Is there a motion?
Move to approve. Second.
Moved and seconded, any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Minutes are approved.
There's two people.
Is Phil in the?
Phil will have his change.
No, he said he was gonna Zoom and asked if we redo the
Yeah, he hasn't said that his internet's too spotty.
Oh,
He
okay.
said today, so he doesn't think he's gonna be able to zoom in, but Mark should be zooming in.
Just let me know.
Okay. And there's nobody else waiting in the wings?
We've tried the gallery view if you can.
Yes, I got 4,
Okay.
3 to me. Mark from ACRC, Gordon.
Okay, so Mark is there.
Okay, great.
Then I think we'll stick to the agenda as proposed. And we have an application for the sidewalk seating from Ty Basil, is the first order of business. And this is just a simple renewal.
It is. They didn't realize that they had to renew each year, so we just gave them a little nudge and they filled out the application.
And there's no outstanding issues on that. Is there a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the sidewalk outside dining permit for Thai Basil.
Second.
Seconded, any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Aye, it looks like that's unanimous, and it is unanimous, okay. There's a possibility of appointing an individual to the Conservation Committee. Background on this, Scott?
You should have a little intro from him in your packet. And that's really all I have, other than the fact that on our Conservation Commission, the chair is vacant, and then D, I don't know how to pronounce the name, Ramang, Michael Cooperman, Leslie Berg, Kathleen James. So those are the people that are on the Conservation Commission.
Was that only 4?
That was 4, one
Yeah.
vacant spot.
Yeah. Hi, Sylvia. Well,
I know him, he's great.
You know- okay.
Great, really great guy.
that's helpful.
Does a ton of work in the food cupboard, and he's my neighbor, and he's a wonderful guy. Looking for a motion.
To the attachments.
I can read it out loud.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, I'll go to that. I live on 3 Maple Drive in Manchester with my 15-year-old daughter Julia and my wife Sally. We bought a house here in 2013. My stepson, Sally's son, is 25 and lives in Seattle. My wife teaches at Stratton Mountain School. Juliet's in the 9th grade at SMS. Currently on the board of the Community Food Cupboard and act as the board secretary. I've held other board positions in the North Shire. I'd like to be on the Conservation Committee because as the town grows, I think it's important to maintain a balance between development and maintain the natural beauty of Manchester. I started my own business in 2010 called the Harrison Rush Group. We're an executive search firm. One of the areas we're involved in is sustainable technology and development. I have a passion for blending responsible development with local landscapes. As the company's CEO, I have an excellent administrative and management skills. More importantly, I have a passion for the town and local environment. I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm not gonna answer them for Tom, I'm just gonna read the letter.
Okay.
Although I like Tom's letter, I will say that.
Our was misspelled as
Did I read it?
our.
or-
No, you wrote it, you
I
read it correctly. It
correctly.
says, we bought our house in
Oh, our house.
2013. It's a-
That's it? Disqualified.
Can't have that. And we have 4 people on the commission. It's been pretty much inactive, to my knowledge, for a few years. Maybe Tom can bring some energy and a little bit of a jump start, maybe get things going again, so if there's a motion.
I'll make the motion, having read the letter from Tom, to appoint him to the Conservation Committee.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And this is how it happens in Manchester. There's a vacancy and you have a pulse. Or just a body temperature anywhere near, whether 98.6, you get appointed. Really, prior to COVID, we had a process, and I don't think it continued to COVID, maybe it did. We had a committee that did the interviews for
Right.
and I know it was you and Wayne for years,
We did it.
and I think we ought to resurrect that committee, so Scottish people apply. They could be interviewed by a committee, which would require convening a special meeting, and then they could bring a report to the board.
And we also, I don't know how he found out about the availability, but there was I think we put something out in the public, looking for,
Advertised.
advertise for that position,
Okay,
a vacancy.
okay. Yeah, 4 is not a good number.
Again,
5 is much better. But at some point, it would be nice for some of us to talk about.
yeah. Well, he has one good ringing endorsement.
It's great.
from the
Yes,
board,
we-
which is
that
great.
is a ringing endorsement from one of the board members. So.
Yeah, and his letter was excellent.
Okay, there's been a little snag with the grand list. Not our doing. We did everything on schedule with the reappraisal, but the state had moved everybody's grand list to a new computer model, and it's not working. And everything's gonna have to be put back into, it's not Nemrick, is it? What?
Actually, Gordon's on.
Oh, Gordon's here. Oh, there he is. Gordon, I'll let you explain this for us.
Well, it's a combination of things. I mean, there's a new system called Vermont Pi that was supposed to be the latest and greatest, that was going to produce all the grand lists and homesteads and current use was all going to be downloaded through that program. As of today, I think they got current use working, but there was an awful lot of chatter among all the listers across the state that it wasn't working. Aside from that, the reappraisal company needed a little bit more time because of some software issues that they were having as well. They've asked for a 2-week extension. That probably means this. The letters to everyone about their reappraisal, about their new assessment, are going to likely go out next week. They have tentatively scheduled informal meetings with people, individual taxpayers, between the 13th and the 17th of June. And then we'll have as they describe it, an abstract-ready file for me on the 19th. Probably we'll publish the abstract on the 20th. The grievance process then will take place at the beginning of July. But once we've got the abstract, it's possible to go ahead and bill. We certainly should be done. I think you have to file or at least send the bills out 30 days before they're due, which would put us about August 1. And, maybe I'm being overly optimistic. I'm hopeful I can get through all the grievances well before then. That doesn't mean the BCA appeals will be done, but my grievance process should be done before August 1, even if I have 100.
So this 30-day extension to file
Well-
the abstract, is it still 30 days?
Well, the state is actually sent a note around. The director of PVR for the tax department sent a note suggesting that towns request 30 days. I think it's more likely to be about 2 weeks, but you might as well just do it one time. We don't have to wait 30 days. We don't have to use it, but if we get that extension, we should be done in plenty of time. I also want to note one other thing. These dates for when they're due are really artificial. The rule is if the town has under 5,000 people, the abstract should be filed by June 4. If you have over 5,000, it's due on June 24 or June 25. The effective population of Manchester is well over 5,000. But the full-time resident population is under 5,000. We have the same number of parcels. We have a little bit more in the number of parcels than a town like Middlebury, with a value equal to Middlebury, if not higher. But they have 9,000 people in their population. We have 4,300 identified. So we will be done before June 24. I suspect it'll be somewhere in that June 20, June 24 week. When we publish, and then there'll be the 14-day grievance period. So it's a short delay, and it shouldn't affect the normal billing time, the payment.
It doesn't sound like we have a choice, does it?
I think the request for the 30 days is reasonable, and that doesn't mean we have to wait 30 days. I think it gives us time to comply with that. 30 days is being allowed by the state. But I think what I heard was, along with learning terms like common level of appraisal, coefficient of dispersion, we also have to take into effect effective population. That's another term that we're dealing with. I say, I think it sounds reasonable. Is that a motion?
No, that wasn't a motion. I was agreeing with I.
I'll make a motion to approve the 30-day extension to the grand list abstract.
Second.
Okay, motion to second, any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That's unanimous. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Agenda item number 7 is the Vermont Alert Overview. And
So, Glenn Hannon is supposed to be joining us, not seeing him waiting for a moment. If you want to bypass that.
Okay, we can come back.
Maybe join us later.
okay, let's table that one until later.
If not, I can walk you through it.
Yeah, but he's planning to attend. We'll give him a few minutes. The next agenda item is an interesting one. We rarely do things collaboratively with the Village of Manchester, but it's a potential grant application for a joint town-village transportation project. Scott, you want to lead us through this one?
Let me just unmute Mark or.
She did it.
Mark, you there? Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Loud and clear. Yeah, so just as a background, we were asked to participate in this joint grant application with the village for bike safety improvements along Main Street. It's basically a large-scale scoping planning study grant which could lead to an implementation grant down the road. they have actually done one prior to this, but just village-centric. And this is a connection and see what we can do to help, make bike and pedestrian safety improvements along Main Street. So without further ado, I'll let Mark add on to this, but our portion of the grant application would be half of the $12,000 local match, so $6,000 with the village contributing equal. Mark, okay, talk about it.
Sure. Yeah, so we got a small municipal planning grant, the village did, and we helped them out with that, looking at transportation needs in the village. And one of the things we did was do a survey of village residents, asking them various questions. One of the questions was, should Route 7A Main Street be made safer for cyclists? And overwhelming majority said yes. So the Planning Commission was interested in moving forward with that, kind of exploring to see what's possible. And there is a V-Trans grant, the V-Trans Bike Ped grant, which comes around every year, and towns can apply for scoping study funds to look at bike ped improvements in town. So the Village Planning Commission and the Town Planning Commission have endorsed the idea, wanted to move forward with applying for a grant. So this would look at making that connection safer for cyclists. So, the scoping study, scoping studies develop, they sort of look at the site, and they develop alternatives, different alternatives, including the mill-build alternative. And they do, right-of-way analysis and all kinds of permitting analysis to see what permits would be necessary for the different alternatives, come up with some basic designs, and come up with a cost estimate. This doesn't obligate the town and village to move forward with the project. This is really just to see, what the possibilities are. So we're doing a similar project in Dorset to connect the village of Dorset with the Manchester Rail Trail. We're wrapping up that study. That's been going on for about a year and a half. And we do quite a few of these scoping studies. And the other thing is, if you want to apply for federal funds, for design construction funds, a scoping study is a prerequisite for that. So anytime the state spends federal funds on projects like this, you have to do a scoping study first. So it's, if the town just did a project on their own, they wouldn't have to do a scoping study. So that's sort of the basics. And the project in Dorset, we applied for $55,000, and that budget, that was a couple of years ago, and of course things have gotten more expensive. That one is a little bit over budget by about $5,000, so I would recommend applying for $60,000. If you apply for more than $60,000, you have to provide a justification in the application, so I don't think it's worth doing that. But that's kind of the going rate for something like this. So, we would be we would be procuring an engineering firm to do this. And BCRC could project manage it if you wanted us to project manage it, or you could put that out to bid too. So that's sort of the basics.
Yeah, thank you. So, Steve, I know you have your hand up, and I'm going to hold off just a minute because we're getting the presentation on this. Megan and Richard, you're both going to present on this?
Yeah, I'm speaking. I'm Rich Highland. I'm the chairman of the Planning Commission in the village. So I'm going to speak, primarily on the village's perspective of this. And a lot of what Mark has already said, we've been working fairly closely with Mark in determining the possibility of a grant. But through that study, we did get a lot of feedback and concern about safety, particularly with bicycle and pedestrian, mostly bicycle more than pedestrian, on that whole 7 corridor. We brought that to the town planning commission because when we were looking at it, it really connects to the town. And, you know, through conversations with them, we've actually kind of extended a little bit of what our original idea was basically going from the Equinox Hotel down to Ways Lane, which is kind of our area of it. Further discussion about it, it really did make a lot of sense to have this single piece connect to more of what the town is really growing into. And we're really looking at trying to study from Prospect Street, which would be way south of the village, all the way down to Barnville Road. So it would actually go right through the center of town. What the scoping study comes up with could be a lot of alternatives. You know, this might be something we do or do not do. It could also be something that could be segmented into smaller pieces that we could take the most critical areas at one piece of, you know, depending on the economics of the whole thing. My own view of it, I think this is something that's going to take a lot of time. You know, projects like this don't happen overnight. You know, hopefully we could leverage, you know, grants and other sources of income, particularly in the environment we have right now where we're looking at infrastructure kinds of changes. When we look at nationwide, what towns and communities are doing anywhere from Washington, D.C. to, you know, smaller towns, bike transportation has become a very growing area. I think with the advent of electric bikes, it's even going to be more and more of a concern. We have been getting feedback from younger families moving to this area that have young children and are concerned about, like, how can they bike to Burn Burton? And right now, that's a really, really difficult thing to do. In talking with Mark too, to be a little bit upfront about this, we are talking about the town of Manchester applying for this grant, not a joint grant. And that's partly the way the grant is structured. It's not something that two municipalities can apply for at the same time. We have presented this to the village trustees back in December, actually. And our village trustees have always voiced their support of it and have agreed to split the cost of the matching part of the grant, which would be kind of a side deal. I think the town is actually the ones that legally are going to be responsible for the $12,000, but we've agreed that we will put in $6,000 towards that. Any other questions that I could be helpful to?
Nothing from me. That was an excellent presentation. Anybody have any questions for Rich? If not, Megan?
Megan Amundsen, I'm a member of the Planning Commission for the town. Rich brought this issue to the Town Planning Commission where we had some discussion because he did originally bring it to us as just the village piece up to Ways Lane. The Planning Commission and the town agreed unanimously that we wanted to see it go to Barnville Road, just along Main Street, because that's about where the shoulder starts to broaden, making it much safer for biking kind of on this end of Main Street. So making a safer pedestrian kind of link through Main Street was something that the Planning Commission felt very strongly about. We unanimously supported the idea of going together for the scoping study, also understanding that there is significant federal grants for this kind of project work if we were to implement something. There's a lot that's been made available, particularly around multimodal transportation from the federal government. So wanting to take advantage of some of those opportunities, you know, the scoping study is, of course, the first step.
If we go back to the Manchester 2020 charrette that was done years ago, I'm going to say 7, 8 years ago.
2014.
2014, yeah, so 9 years ago. That bicycle as a mode of transportation was one of the top 3 choices. There were 3 top projects that came out of that, and bicycle circulation through town was one of them. So it would certainly be in keeping with that. There was a huge amount of citizen participation in that. It took place in Burn, and I want to say that through the course of a few days that went on, hundreds of people participated. So this has certainly been keeping with that particular decision. And we've done a few small things, but certainly nothing on this scale that would address the issue through the center of town. So my understanding, Rich, is that this would be a Manchester municipal application. But-
That's what Mark is really recommending. And I think, you know, from the village's point of view, I think the town has the resources to be able to manage it better than our little office that basically has 4 employees total. And that includes our road crew and our, you know, somebody answering the phone and our zoning administrator. So, you know, we don't have a lot of depth to be dealing with that. I think if
Well,
went that
let me-
way, you know, we rely on volunteers.
Let me remind everyone that the village is part of Manchester,
Absolutely,
and we
With the
work for you
umbrella.
too.
yeah,
So it makes a lot of sense
yeah.
from that perspective. Okay, any questions for Megan or Steve? I see Steve, he's next. Steve, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Ivan has, first question, has the board gone in and looked at the V-Trans permit application, et cetera, for the 4 stages that they recommend?
Enlighten us. Oh, he froze. No, maybe
Okay, I have gone in, can you hear me?
not. Yes.
I've gone in and read this over in the V-Trans.
No sense.
And number one, there's a federal additions funding, there's a federal design funding, there's a federal scoping study, and then there's a state-funded small-scale study. Mark, are you talking the state-funded small-scale study?
No, the small scale study is just for really small projects like crosswalks and very, very small scale projects. And the idea with that is, you know, when you involve federal funds, there's a lot more bureaucracy. So V-Trans wanted to make some state funds available for really small projects. But for a project like this, we would have to go through scoping using the BikePed grant or Transportation Alternatives grant. Because you have to look at all the different alternatives, and you would have to look at right-of-way impacts and what permits would be needed. You know, what are the archaeological and architectural resources that can be impacted. So that would really have to be a scoping study.
So is that a 20% match or a 50% match?
That's a 20% match.
Okay. What is the final destination of this project? It's not just going to be this grant, correct? You're going to come back to the town of Manchester and want more money to finish this project, I would assume.
Not
Well, that-
necessarily, I would say.
I would say it depends on what happens. This is a study, a feasibility study. There'll be some, I assume, will be some options and opportunities that are identified through the engineering study, and it will be done by engineers. There'll be absolutely no implementation tied to this, but through the recommendations from the engineers at the end of the study, we would have, there would be some recommendations for what we might do, but not necessarily what we have to do. There might be a menu from which we can choose. But for us to go forward on implementation on any of this, we would seek, again, grant money to, and like Megan said, there's a lot of federal grant money available for intermodal transportation projects, for which this would be. Megan?
In addition to that, some federal grants allow for in-kind match, and we do have some expertise in town that could do that if we were lucky enough to win a grant that allowed that.
And Megan was talking about in-kind contributions that can be applied to the match. And we've done that on several occasions where just simply the administration part of it was done in-house, and it was enough on a per hour basis to cover a significant part of the local match. So,
Ivan?
yes, I'm here.
That, I mean, you know as well as I do, when you get into the grants, they want to match, whether it be 20 or 50%. So what I'm looking at is taxpayer total dollars. I mean, we don't want to hire BCRC to manage this. If we do, we're going to have to pay them. Is that correct?
We can,
Well, you will have to hire a municipal project manager. That's usually 10% of the budget. So you could hire us or you could hire somebody else.
So that's more money.
that'd be.
No, that'll be included in the grant. That's a participating cost in the grant.
So technically, we in the village combined would be responsible for a 20% match on whatever that cost was, but as Rich said, he's hoping, and Scott has confirmed, that we can do a lot of this management in-house, not just the administrative part. And we could, and we could, there's opportunities to perhaps use that as in-kind contribution to cover some of our match. And I'd have to do some research on that.
Not for this grant, actually.
Not for this grant, okay.
We need to actually do a monetary match for this particular grant.
Got it.
If we were to implement something, we might have an opportunity to do in-kind match as part of our match for
That'd be
that
an
grant.
implementation. Thank you. Go ahead, Steve. I know you have another question.
If that money, let's say you approve it, this year's physical budget, but you don't have it in there.
We have. There, took care of that. We have line items in the budget that are for consulting, that sort of thing. I hope you're there.
There it is.
I had this conversation with town manager. There are funds there that we could use. It would be appropriate to use toward the contribution to this project that we chose to do. So there is money in the budget that could be used for this.
The initial scoping study.
Yes.
Yeah, which is $6,000 from us.
Okay. Sylvia.
I think on some of these projects that are now coming into the purview of the public at large, with the economy that we're federal and state, I just think we should tread lightly. I don't think we should get into anything too deep. I really don't. I don't understand, the way people want to go forward when we're looking to cut budgets.
I suspect.
That's all I hear lately.
I suspect, Sylvia, that depending on what happens over the short term, and that federal funding might become a little bit tight. But this is grant money that's available now,
But who
administered
says
through the
they're
state,
gonna
federal
keep their
dollars.
promise?
And this is a topic that has been identified as a significant topic here in Manchester. And we have a long list of potential projects. This one's not near the top, but when there's grant money available, when you can leverage your money, it makes sense to leverage that money and save the pool of money that we have for other projects. Things such as undergrounding of the power lines. The last estimate that we got on that was something in excess of $400,000. I imagine it's pushing $600,000 now to do the rest of the underground project. So that's, instead of us, if we have $600,000 in certain funds to spend, I wouldn't want to dump it all into a project like that. When these kind of projects come along and we can leverage our contribution by another 80%, we take a small piece of that, get this project done, and we still have that big chunk of money to work with down the road. And this is one of those that's probably important enough that we ought to take a look at it. People are changing the way that they travel. Our town was originally laid out to accommodate horses and buggies, but since 100 years ago, everything has been designed to accommodate the automobile. And the pedestrian, bicycles weren't part of the picture back then, really, although there were people riding them. Pedestrians were secondary. Everything was laid out to accommodate cars. In the last 40 years or so, we've been trying to make a shift where pedestrians and other vulnerable types of transportation are given more priority, and the cars need to become less and less important because of any number of items: the environment, the cost of fuel, people being able to spend money on transportation. More and more people are walking and riding a bicycle, riding a skateboard, which is also a vulnerable form of transportation. And right now, under state statute, the vulnerable forms of transportation have right-of-way and precedence over the automobile, which is considered non-vulnerable. So people don't realize, but there's a major shift going toward pedestrian, bicycle, and other forms of vulnerable transportation. Bill?
Yeah, I'd speak on behalf of Bike Manchester, who spearheaded the rail trail project, as I think most of you are aware, and they urge you to support this project, and also to make you aware, if you're not, that there's a major project underway by a number of alternative transportation folks for a bikeway between New York City and Montreal. And Manchester is on a tentative stop list, but right now there's a bypass route because there's no safe way to get through town. And so if we can create a safe route through town, which the scoping study will look at, then it would be designated as a stopover point for people that use this trail. And pieces of it are being done here and there, particularly in southern New England, Connecticut, and Massachusetts right now. And the move is to head this way, head north on up to Montreal.
And you brought up a subject that should be highlighted here, is that the Wendy Cram bike circuit that we have that goes North Road and around integrates nicely with the rail trail, but it does not integrate into the middle of town. And this would go a long ways with, like, I think it was Megan that said, the wide shoulders coming up Main Street after Barnumville Road. If you get people from the village to this stretch here, it creates a fairly safe passage up the Wendy Cram loop, which in effect connects you to the rail trail and suddenly becomes a much larger and more significant critical mass for people that use bicycles.
And to Bill's point, it keeps us competitive for that kind of tourism.
Yeah, that's. I was aware of that, and I was also aware that they couldn't find a safe path through Manchester. We were actually approached on that several years ago.
Well, anyway, we had people bike from New York City to Manchester and stay at the motels around and all that, and then go on. I have been away from the motel business for some time, and when I was involved, there are people coming up quite frequently. They manage. Now, I guess maybe the automobile situation is more heavier now, and consequently they're looking for this kind of project. But we've had 50 people on those bikes.
Yes.
Around us.
But
It all
also want to
has,
remind
and
people
it's not unusual.
The significant changes that have been made when new Route 7 came through. It used to be every truck, all the truck transportation came right through the middle of Manchester, from the village all the way up through. It was the only significant north-south venue. And then when they completed the new Route 7 to Route 11 and 30, it turned and came into Manchester and went through Malfunction Junction and up through. The town was extremely congested, extremely dangerous, and any through traffic went through town. And now the through traffic is outside of town on the bypass on Route 7. And what we're dealing with now is, for the most part, is people that want to be here, that they're here because they have something to do in the area. And that's an easier situation to manage with regard to bicycle pedestrian traffic. But we we still need to focus on that. Just because people have been able to, I think you said, brave the trip in the past, that kind of makes me think that it could be a little bit unsafe, and we need to be aware of that. And we're talking about spending, I won't say it's an insignificant amount of money, but to get a $60,000 study done, it's going to cost Manchester $6,000. And to Steve's question, it won't be from the general fund. It'll probably, unless we find something in the budget to fund it through, it quite possibly could be ARPA, could be one of our other reserve accounts. So,
But I feel this way.
yeah, hold on, so.
I just also want to that point, so we're putting in $6,000 for $60,000 study with no committal. We're not obligated to then do anything. We could look at it, we could read it, we could use it as firewood. I mean, we don't have to do anything. It's a scoping study.
Well, we have a lot of those.
Yeah, but it gives
Yeah,
you information.
okay, all right. You can explore as much as you want, but I'll say this, these New York City people, the traffic, and I haven't been to New York City in years, or Boston. I mean, I go the back roads. I sort of fly my own route like a pro. But, anyway, the cities are populated with I don't know how many times greater than Manchester. These people live in the city, they bike in the city, they get along with traffic. They come up here, it's a haven. What trouble is there to get around?
Well, we're not only talking about people that come here from an urban environment, but we're talking about locals also. I mean,
I like to ride
Rich had mentioned kids getting safely to Bernburg. I used to bicycle to Bernburg all the time, and never had a problem with it. But I can see it being a danger.
Well, we can investigate.
I will
We
also
can
say,
have our studies.
most urban environments have instituted protected bike lanes at this point because it has been so dangerous to bike in urban environments. So these are people, if we're talking about tourists who are coming up to bike, these are people coming from protected bike lanes who are expecting protected bike lanes.
One of the reasons that I'm very receptive to this idea is this is our main artery through the middle of town. And right now, it's not conducive to safe bicycle travel. And bicycles, as Bill said, are becoming more and more a major part of transportation. I'm leaning in that direction.
Looking for a motion?
Are there any more comments first? I will entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to approve Manchester going forward with a grant application for the joint village town transportation project scoping study.
Second.
And would you like to put in there a cap of up to $6,000?
With a cap of up to $6,000 of Manchester funds to be matched by village funds of $6,000.
I'm going to second it again.
Discussion of that motion?
Do we have to put in $60,000? Do we have to say $60,000? Because you have to specify.
You don't.
You know?
Well, we just authorized up to $12,000 between the two applications, and the match is 20%, so that kind of says.
Doesn't that motion require something about bicycles?
It did. It referenced this request that's on our agenda. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous. Scott? And I thank everyone for their input on that.
Thank you.
We may learn something really cool out of this, or we may learn nothing. We may not implement anything, but it's a good time to take a look at it.
I just want to, thank you guys for the support and the conversation that went on here tonight. I think it really speaks to what this community really, how it behaves, and how we really all want to make it a better place to be and realize that it's constantly changing. I know, we work on the planning commissions, and planning commissions don't really do things like you're doing right now. We're trying to throw things out there and, you know, look ahead to the future and try to get things out there that give us the opportunity to, you know, really go for better things. And I think this is something that it'll open up other opportunities.
Yeah, you know, I like to see the planning commissions represented here. We're all part of Manchester. We're gonna open up a better line of communication between the select board and the planning commission. I've spoken with Phil a couple of times, and just at our last meeting, we were talking about something that really should be looked at by the planning commission, but I don't know if that information's been passed on yet. But relative to the vending ordinance, it's basically a land use that is unregulated from a zoning perspective. And in many ways, when you give somebody a license for a vending spot, it may have an adverse impact on the zoning permit for the underlying property. For instance, it ties up a couple of parking spaces, and all those parking spaces may be dedicated. So I think the planning commission should be part of that process to a certain degree. There are other ways that we can work together to make things work more smoothly from the township perspective. I think we've been speaking with the village a lot more over the last few months than we have over the last 40 years. So that's positive. And it's been a long time since we had, and perhaps never, had a member of the village planning commission that was a Manchester Select Board meeting. Welcome.
My second one.
You've been here, but not in the capacity as a planning commission chair. So,
Thank you.
anything, Mark, that you can add to that?
No, thank you very much. So the only thing I'll need for the grant application is a letter from the select board, just saying that, you know, you support the application and that you understand there's a local match. But I can be in touch with you or Scott. Just maybe do that.
Yeah, Scott will be the focal point on behalf of the town, and that way we can get things done in a more efficient manner.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do you want to go back to 7?
He's
There's
not
one
on.
here.
He's not on. Why don't we just, I mean, there's no rush for this, why don't we just push that to next meeting? I mean, he had told me a couple times he was gonna zoom in and wanted to do it. I'd rather have him
Yeah.
involved rather than me explain it. It'd be more worthwhile than we.
Basically, it's an alert system. It'll be available to Vermont residents. And it's something that you would sign up for. You're not going to be forced to have it, but it's an emergency alert system. It's gaining some traction. I think it's already being used.
It's in place.
Perhaps even places where you would serve as the town manager.
We did this in Wilmington, and the select board signed up, and a lot of the public signed up. It's been in place since 2013. I think it came about after Irene, to be honest with you.
Is this why they need a cell tower?
I think it's unrelated to that. But I don't know for sure.
Suspicious time.
All right, so if everybody's in agreement on that, we'll just push that off to a future meeting. And that brings us down to the town manager updates.
So I think in your packet, you do have the year-end summary from the local option tax. If you don't, I made some hard copies. The only reason I did because.
I think it was titled GL abstract, but it was,
All right,
if
if you
you-
pass that along, just, you know, for a second.
Sure.
it was titled GL abstract, but it was the, you have an access issue.
Yeah.
This has notes.
So, yeah, if you notice on the right side, I've totaled them, total each year, each fiscal year, and the total between meals and rooms and the sales and use tax. Just to save you the trouble of having to go through this. And you'll see that it's actually declined a little bit, from fiscal year '22, fiscal year '23, meals and rooms has increased, but sales and use has gone down.
The Amazon revenues, right?
Yeah, most likely. So I just wanted you to see that and see what, you know, going back 4 or 5 years.
Oh, it's over on the side.
On the right side. Those are just my notes for your reference.
Downtown, but- Down about 70,000 roughly, year over year. And that's, and you said that's from the, not meals and sales.
Yeah, you can, you
Oh,
can
yeah,
see,
yeah. Sales, meals
me-
and right?
meals and rooms are up,
Yeah.
but the sales to use is declining.
The year-to-date for '23 is 1,574.
Yeah.
Yes,
And then,
everything.
so we're,
That's the year end actually, because we're done receiving the quarter.
For fiscal year 22, it was 1.6. Which was up considerably from 21, but we're a little off. It's well in excess of what we had budgeted or anticipated for fiscal year 23. Which is
But do you know what we budgeted in 23 off the top of your head?
1.375.
Correct. I had it.
Yeah, I know. I wanted to be good.
That is good. We have someone on Zoom raising their hand. When you're ready, we
Ivan,
Yes.
1.375 is what was put into the budget. What is the total? Right now?
The total fiscal year 23 is 1.574. So just about exactly 200,000 above the budgeted amount.
Uh,
So in previous years, coming up to COVID, that $200,000 would have gone into the reserve account.
Right,
It would be my intention to get that money into the reserve account. But we also need to look at the year-end numbers. The motion at town meeting doesn't force us to do that. And my intention next year will be to get the motion to force us to use just what we budgeted, no matter what the sources of that money are. And if the proceeds are in excess of that number, it'll go into the reserve account. And obviously, if it's less than, if the proceeds are less than what we budgeted, it will come out of the reserve account. But I want to get that reserve account built back up.
well, I think that's the route to go, and, you know, if the budget, if the year end doesn't, come out, you know, a break even, you'll have to use that money, right?
Depends on what the deficit is.
We have-
So you just
we
said.
have come out ahead of it. So
Yeah.
this is the end of the year. So
Yeah, relative to these dollars, we were ahead, well, I think what Steve was saying on the general fund, if we wind up,
Yes.
if we wind up in a deficit situation,
Right.
would these monies be used to offset the deficit? And my answer would be, the way the motion was structured at town meeting, we do have the authority to do that. But I think it was inadvertent. The authority's there, but I don't think that was our intent. But, so we'll talk about that, if and when we have to deal with that issue. It's never our intention to end the year with a deficit, and Mike and Scott are looking at that. They're trying to keep us in the ballpark on the fiscal year budget, which ends a little over a month from now.
How does that look? Can you, I'm sorry, I don't mean to speak out of turn, but
And it doesn't look a whole lot different than it did the last time I looked at it, which we're coming in pretty close. There are a number of budget lines that are over. There's another number of them. There's a number of the budgetary lines. I think when I did it on March 31st, there were 78 lines, is my recollection, that had already spent in excess of the whole year, and there was still another quarter left. But there are a number of them that are underspent. A lot of the spending is done for a number of the budgetary lines at this point. There's a certain seasonality to it. Some are very early loaded, some are late loaded. It's pretty complex, but Mike's been looking at it. He still thinks we're coming in about where we expected we would. So, and we really won't know until the end of the year.
Right, and those overages in budget, you've identified what they are, right? So you know exactly where that money was spent.
A number of the significant ones were offset by unanticipated revenue. There was grant money that was used in excess of $250,000. It showed up as on, if you just look at the expense side, as an overage on the expense, but it was completely offset by other revenues. There were a couple of those lines that were, there were some anomalies there. There were some, for instance, county taxes that were duplicious, that, or the timing was such that it wound up, perhaps two payments wound up in fiscal year 23 instead of spread over 2 fiscal years. And there were a number of them that were like that. By the time we backed all those anomalies out, we were at roughly 74%, between 74 and 76% of spending at exactly the 3/4 mark for the year. So, and a lot, like I said, a lot of those are discretionary and were front loaded. A lot of those things were paid for in the first few months of the fiscal year. So I still feel good that we're going to come in pretty close on the budget side.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
2 questions. The first, are we legally allowed to run a deficit budget?
Yes, but we never have. There are any number of situations that might lead to a town being in a deficit at the end of the year. We have a fund balance, and usually that, for many, many years, we came in under budget. When you applied revenues to expenses, we had money left over. That went to a fund balance. In most budgetary years, we would purposefully take a piece of that fund balance and apply it to the next year. It's so that we don't just accumulate money that was raised by property taxes. But the fund balance would be one place where you look to offset deficit spending. We could have any kind of emergency that happens at the end of the year that we couldn't anticipate would put us in a deficit situation. We would have to cover whatever the expense of that was and deal with it in the next year. But if you come through with a deficit, that deficit would be applied to the next fiscal year, and you'd have to formulate a budget to try to absorb that and bring it back to it.
So, Ivan, sorry to interrupt. So our next meeting, I have the auditors coming in to explain the year-end audited statements for us. And one of the key things to look at for that is unassigned funds. That's what Ivan's referencing. That's a carryover if there's any. And you also have the authority to borrow at any time.
My second question is, if this overage goes into the reserve fund, will that be available for us to make interest payments on the loan that we took out from ourselves for the sewer line?
Say that again?
We did that at the,
I didn't hear that.
I'm sorry.
I got a question.
If the overage goes into the reserve fund, will it be available for helping us make the interest payments on the loan we made to ourselves for the sewer line?
CERC versus taxpayer relief, right?
Yeah, we on any money that we lent to ourselves, we have not charged interest. You know, there was, for instance, the fire engine that we decided to lend money to ourselves from the.
Oh, I thought the decision for the sewer line was to.
Oh, the sewer line. Oh, bonding.
Interest.
Okay. Oh, no, that's very different. Yeah. The bond payments, of course, are very interest front loaded. We have to make those payments for bound by law.
You can't prepay.
Yeah, and you can't prepay it. There's no mechanism.
We gave ourselves a loan on the fire truck this year.
And the
I
highway,
was
the highway,
CERC fund.
But the
highway truck we're doing this
I
year.
saw
Not
the
taxpayer
fire truck,
relief.
not the sewer line.
Yeah.
but we're not charging ourselves interest on
No.
that.
It was to
That's
save,
the
it was to
point.
save 80,000, that was
60,000 or?
That was on a, that was on
60.
a, that was on a dump truck. Yeah, it was over $50,000 that we saved by loaning ourselves money out of the,
Right, there was a discussion about charging ourselves interest for that.
CERT fund. Yeah,
Saving ourselves.
I'm sorry?
Saving
Saving, I
ourselves.
think it was saving.
Yeah, I don't think we ever talked
There was
about.
a discussion, no, there, I mean, there was, I mean, the answer was no, you guys aren't gonna, about us, paying ourselves the interest back to the reserve fund to build up the reserve fund again.
Yeah.
That was the idea.
There actually was a very short discussion about that, but we thought in this instance, it just makes sense to save the money, not charge the, not raise taxes to pay back the capital fund. But it's my hope that we can get those capital accounts back up to a sustainable balance. And we may do more of that. We may use the funds so we don't have to borrow, but pay ourselves back, so we don't just deplete it, pay for that capital item through the CERT fund. I'd like to see that particular fund back up around $1 million. The property tax relief fund should be at least $500,000. There's some question as to whether it's somewhere in the 275 to 5 something range, 510. And we'll know the answer to that based on what the auditors tell us. But and the reason I say that is because there was several $100,000 in excess funds used the last couple of years to balance the budget from the taxpayer relief fund, which is option taxes. I thought that wasn't allowed, but in my reading of the motions since COVID, it got simplified because it went to Australian ballot instead of being voted on the floor. And the way that it's worded, we were not bound to take any overage from what we had budgeted and put it into that reserve account, and it was used to balance the budget. And I noticed it in fiscal year 21, we had final numbers for that year. And I was struck by the amount of money. We were looking at, in fiscal year 21, we had proceeds of, it's not adding up either, yeah.
1,208,000?
Yeah. We had a contribution from the taxpayer relief fund that was about a couple $100,000 more than what we had budgeted in the year. In my research, I found out that there was nothing wrong that happened there, but I don't want that to continue. Bill?
I'd like to go back to the option tax. Help me out, please. What fiscal year are we in right now?
We're still in 23 right now.
Right, okay. So what period were we talking about for the total of the option tax?
Okay, that comes in lumps, and we received our final lump for fiscal year 23, so this is a final number for fiscal year 23.
Even though fiscal year 23 is not over yet.
Okay, you're talking about the money we get from the state.
Well, it's money,
But it covers what?
It's money that the state gives back from us after they take ours away.
Well, getting back.
This is
right.
the sales.
They're
They give us
returning our
they give us
funds.
a portion of it back.
They're returning our money, right?
Not all of it.
Right, keep 30%.
They keep 30% plus fees on top of that. So.
But we're actually covering the period of back to, as late, well, last fiscal year. That's what you're talking about, right?
It
July
lags.
of 21
lags.
to June of 22.
It lags by a few months, yeah.
It lags back.
By 9 months.
No, it lags about a quarter.
So we're talking about December quarter numbers that we got paid on.
Pardon?
December quarter end numbers that we're getting paid on, but we're not gonna get any more money for the first quarter till next fiscal year.
So December, January, February is the payment we just received, which is the last payment for fiscal year 23.
So we're always a quarter behind when you're talking about this report then?
Yeah.
Because that's what I
And
was
we don't
wondering when
see
you say
we don't see
fiscal
any numbers.
23.
We don't see any numbers until we get the report.
Right.
So,
Do they reimburse us quarterly?
yes.
Yeah. June, September, December, and March. The last payment's March 31st.
Not a lot of transparency either, right?
No, I mean, we know how many returns were filed. And the more returns, of course, the more it costs us, because there's a charge per return. Good for the state.
So the money you're talking about is then it's through the end of March of '23, but it doesn't
Yes.
include the last quarter, it won't include the,
That'll show up as the first
That's the
quarter.
first quarter of
Fiscal
next
year
year.
'24.
okay.
For revenue purposes. It wasn't collected in that quarter. And some of the numbers, there are filers that file every month, and there are filers that file by quarterly. And you might not see some of those quarterly filings even in that quarter's report. They might actually show up in the next one. So there could be quite a lag there on some of them.
Thank you.
B,
They're on the B.
town manager update B.
Ah, Major B.
So we've gone through the applicants, and we ended up with a couple applicants that we liked as people. Megan was part of it, she contributed.
We're talking about the zoning administrator, everybody.
We
It's
didn't get
a
anybody
search.
with zoning experience, or even a sniff of a background in zoning or real estate or something. We got a couple of people that were willing to try to learn the job. It just kind of left us empty, as far as hiring somebody at that point. So I've talked to Phil a little bit about this and talked to Tim Waker about it, and we've actually had several long discussions with Peter himself about possibly assuming a larger role as zoning administrator. So he's willing to do it based on certain criteria, and I think we can couch the position to meet where he would fit his requirements, so to speak. And then we would look for a zoning administrative assistant / planning person, either with that background or with some interest in that, at least learning that position. And so that's our hope right now. And this is not a formal request. I'll bring that to you at the next meeting once we get Phil's official rubber stamp when he gets back from Europe. But speaking from Austria, or wherever he was from that day, he was okay with the idea. Tim's been a proponent of it also. So it was really, if we can set things up so that Peter can be more efficient right now, he's really backlogged, so to speak, and we're working on ways to streamline that. So I think we can do it. It's going to take a little bit of time, but we will get more efficient with that. He is willing to do whatever it takes to help the town, in his words. And so we're willing to give that a shot if it's all right with you guys. So just running out there, give a little feedback, and then we can talk about it more in depth at the next meeting.
Yeah, historically, the zoning administrator position has been a difficult one to fill. It's hard to get qualified applicants. There's a lot of people that are interested in planning, but not a lot of people interested in being a zoning administrator. It's a statutory position, it's one that we have to fill. It's a select board appointment, but it is also an employee, so it falls under kind of a dual, every other employee in town falls under the town manager, this is the select board appointment. As well as the town. But from an administrative perspective, the person, because they are an employee, would fall under your management. They would, you would do performance evaluations and that sort of thing. It just has that extra layer of, and the planning commission needs to recommend this person to the select board under statute. So it's, everybody gets involved.
More to
We've
come.
been pretty lucky over the years. We've had some.
I'll just speak as someone who participated in the interviews. This is I'm very optimistic about this potential pathway to filling the position. I think
That's
it's
good to
very
hear.
good for the town.
Yeah, good. Peter's a great guy. He's really, he is a great face for the town, for the public to meet with. And I've spoken with him on several occasions over the last several months. I'd always start with, how are things going? How do you feel about the permanent position as zoning administrator? He was never very excited about that happening. And I would just keep saying, you're doing a great job. Hope you keep it, at some point you'll consider it. So I'm certainly a big fan of the direction this is taking. I'm hoping it works out well. Norma.
When you change zoning for an area, isn't the property owner supposed to be notified?
That's a good question. I'm not sure that's true. It's a warned process, and there's it's a dual process, goes through the planning commission and the select board, and there's warned. The planning commission has to hold 2 hearings, or no, the planning commission holds 1 hearing, select board holds 2, I think that's the way it works out. But we encourage as much participation, and I think there's a lot of participation at the planning commission level by citizens.
I was told by my property
Yeah.
that when I bought, it was agricultural, because it was part of the Hayes Farm. And then when Martin Drain built the houses, they did an overlay of residential. And I was told that those are gone. You can't use them, they're not grandfathered. They're just plain gone. And it's been changed to 10 units per acre. I'm just totally confused.
Yeah, all the overlays they're gone now. I don't think we have any overlays anymore. I think it's all based on the underlying zone, I believe.
We have the historic.
Oh, well, yeah, those kind of, yeah, I was thinking, we used to have, for instance, up this street, what was it called? It was a commercial overlay that allowed restaurants and hotels and that sort of thing.
That's been all absorbed into the new.
I think it's all been absorbed into the underlying zone at this point. I don't think we have those commercial and industrial overlays that we used to have over a residential zone.
No, I think that was part of the overhaul.
Yeah, I think so too. But I don't know specifically what happened with your property. I don't even know really what zone you're in anymore. It's right over here if anybody that needs to know.
Across the street.
Across the street. And could certainly
Can
take a look.
somebody just send me a note? and
Yeah,
say,
yeah.
This is what it is. Now, this is what
We
happened.
have zoning maps, and it'd be very easy for any one of us to look at it and tell you
Okay.
what your requirements are.
Because I was totally confused.
Yeah.
But it is.
Yeah,
Thanks.
we'll let you know. Okay,
Just a
wastewater
wastewater line extension, yeah, I mean, you see the actions happening, the digging going on, and they're moving well, without any major problems so far. And we're getting lots of inquiries about people connecting, which is great. So now we have to process, we can explain the process to people, and, which is basically, they'll need an engineer. The engineer will submit permits to the town and to the state, and then he'll design a connection, and then they'll go from there as they go along. So everything's happening fairly quickly. We're hopeful that we'll get a lot of connections as we go through. It looks like that's the case. I mean, it's the obvious choice for people, but not everybody, sees it that way. But the construction itself is going well, and we actually have that Melissa Gurney is on site representing our engineer. So if anybody ever sees her standing out there, you can say hello to Melissa, and drive by. So she's out there all the time for that construction. So it's moving ahead, and we're hopeful that it will as scheduled.
Have you done any like reverse solicitation of any of the properties along the way, or gotten a map? I think Chrissy had a map of the properties along the line, like, is there a way that we could reach out to them and just say, you know, this is, I mean, obviously the way, and this is the process?
So last Friday, we sent out letters to everybody.
Okay.
So that's what we're getting feedback from right now, and questions.
Perfect.
And so everybody's gotten it. We can tell just by the number of calls. That's all I have.
And Norma, you had asked me about the termination point of this project.
I was gonna say, where is it?
Okay,
in here?
is that still a question that you need to have answered?
It is.
Okay, Scott, termination point?
So it's at the mobile home park.
So that's changed from, right, or no,
Yeah, it's,
Yeah, that was in the discussion plans, I believe, when you guys were talking about.
There was a-
Like this.
there was a phase
back,
three.
this-
There was a
that's
phase three.
This is phase
So
three.
you're out of it
yeah. So,
then. Her property is out of it
yeah, I think you're beyond the termination point.
if it's the trailer park, what about Travis? Are they in or out?
Who's that?
Travis Wood,
Oh,
Bishops, I can say that.
probably Bishops, that makes sense to me, thank you. Let's see if it's the trailer. Probably they're on it, I would think.
They're out.
They probably have access, wouldn't you think, Bill? I don't know, yeah, you think probably.
We have maps in the office, we can check. I'm not sure.
Do you have a timeline on when this is gonna happen?
It's happening
John,
now.
going now?
No, I
it'll-
know
it'll-
my property,
Oh, the next phase,
the next one.
we have nothing on that. We scaled it back because of the fiscal part of it. We just couldn't find the money to get it all together.
It's just nice to know.
Yeah. I meant to get back to you on that. I didn't have the answer myself, so.
I'm sorry.
I meant to get back to you on that. I didn't have the answer myself, so I slipped through the
I
cracks.
figured that was the reason.
Yeah.
You knew I would know.
If you're right on Main Street, you're in the mixed use 2 zone.
Mixed use.
Is it,
No, not
if she's right
necessarily.
across the street?
There's a mix of mixed use and rural agricultural in that section.
Yeah, I'm looking at the map.
So
So,
is agriculture,
and then up on Moon
Or
Ridge,
it's not.
it's rural residential, but, and there's residential one off of North Ridge Run. But right across the road directly is MU2, mixed use 2, but I don't know where you are.
She's up the road a ways.
Oh, she is?
I'm directly across from their entrance.
Yeah, yeah,
My property,
there's rather great.
Yeah, and this one. and
Is
that-
it Norma?
Yeah.
yes.
You're in mixed use 2, MU2.
Maybe
And I don't have I can't give you all the uses in MU2, but
At least you know, that's what the zone is.
that's what the
Now
zone is.
now we can look at that and see what that means, but,
The other thing is, there's no grandfathering of the agricultural or you said the overlay was gone, right? Is that correct?
There was an overhaul of all the zoning in what, 17?
yeah,
Thereabouts?
somewhere around there, yeah.
Where all the zoning changed and those overlays were incorporated into the current zoning. So there aren't any overlays, but the zoning all changed. So what you are today is what you've been since 2017, most likely. So nothing's been grandfathered in, the entire zoning has changed.
So the grandfathering is eliminated as well as the.
Well, if you had a use, an active use, preceded the change in the zoning, in Manchester zoning, you were able to continue that use unless it's discontinued for a period of more than 18 months. We don't grandfather people out if they have an existing use.
Yeah, well, we have Norwich.
Yeah, and I don't see any of that as being
It's
not
not in
allowed. I
conflict,
think-
it's not in conflict with your
Okay.
current zoning.
Yeah, I don't think it,
There
The
is
definition-
online if you want to go to the town of Manchester, but Peter can
we'll get,
help you
I'll
go
talk to
through
Peter
all the
about it.
different
We'll get an
uses.
actual answer for you.
I did,
Excellent.
I sold the property across from you last year, and if it stayed the same, it would continue to be grandfathered. It was in the office industrial, that was the old overlay, but it was, this is, the White House, right across, right next to the.
Ed Clark,
Oh,
Well, but that's, yeah, now it's a new owner,
it's been sold again.
yeah.
So your current zoning wouldn't preclude you from having agricultural use, you can absolutely have agricultural use. It just would determine the density on that property.
and it sounds like,
Housing units.
it sounds like your property would be able to be developed with a higher density, which means more units. Right.
It doesn't mean that you have to develop.
You don't have to do that.
I don't have to cut all my trees
No,
down.
you don't have to call it.
Oh, no.
They're not, but they can continue because they are permitted in that zone.
Oh,
It's not just that it's grandfathered in.
yeah,
That would not be a non-permitted use in that zone.
makes sense.
Other questions, other business?
Other
Sylvia?
business, yeah. I was wondering, how is the project behind Walgreens, the parking lot, coming along?
Oh, good question. Do we have an answer to that?
They're constructing it.
The answer might be right back beside
Yeah,
you.
right here, probably
I know, the
more than
manager. Yes.
There's good progress this week. They're putting in the stone for the big sink, as I refer to it, and the drainage pipe. So hopefully, we said by the end of June.
Are you gonna come in on budget?
Absolutely, that's mandatory.
That is,
All right.
because I'm telling you, that was a big hole. I don't know, I think they almost met the devil out of the other end.
I think he's sitting right next to you. But,
They resurrected me.
yeah, that has to
Boy,
store.
they went down.
That has to store quite a bit of water, because there's a lot of runoff onto that area, and the idea is that's a collection pit.
I know,
And
and
and over time, it's gonna be able to release that water into the groundwater, but it's gotta be able to take quite a heavy charge, so it's a big hole.
Big bathtub.
God, it was. I couldn't believe that they had to go down that far.
It wasn't that deep.
Wasn't it? Well, you may have expected
It's
it.
3 to 3.
I'm gonna end the conversation in the back of the room. Steve, you got a question?
Well, I just want to make a comment under other business. First of all, I had to call the police department the other day on an individual that had some issues, and I want to thank them because it wasn't 3 minutes and they were there, and they had to call the squad, and it wasn't another 3 minutes and the squad was there. So a special thank you to them. The other thing I had was we lost a very dear businessman in Manchester this week. Howard Wilcox passed away. And Howard was a very big philanthropist and donation for the ice cream to a lot of the nonprofits, and his family should be sympathized.
I think, Steve, that I'm gonna ask that this evening we adjourn in memory of Howard Wilcox, and with recognition as such. So Jan, if you just want to file that one away for a few minutes from now, that would be entirely inappropriate. Thank you, Steve. Anything else?
Mr. Chairman, at 5 o'clock Wednesday, the 24th, I believe there's an EMS open house here at the Emergency Services Building. Is that right?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow night, 5 o'clock.
I believe it's during the day also.
Maybe during, I may have put 5 because that's when I can get over there.
Right, and I think that'd be okay, but I think there's some other times during the day that you can make it.
Okay. Is it on the website anywhere, do you think? or
I just found out about it about a couple
While
hours.
you're checking on that, Bill, you had a question?
What?
Yeah. Is there any street fest on the agenda this year?
There is.
There are two planned.
I don't have the dates in front of me.
One is
Okay.
next Friday.
Pardon?
I think one's next Friday.
Oh, that
I
one.
don't know.
It's on the schedule. It's on the schedule.
Yeah, that seems rather early.
I think
Yeah, I
it's
think-
there.
Check that one too. It's because-
Yeah, I don't see it here. And I'm trying to figure out where I saw the EMS event, which I think was online. I think it was on Facebook when I saw it, but there must have been a reason why I thought.
June 23rd is the first test.
June 23rd. So
Yeah.
That's a month from today.
June 23rd. And July 21st.
You're talking about the street fest?
Yes.
Yes, thank
It's
you.
June 23rd, you say?
Yep, June 23rd and July 21st.
And what's the meeting tomorrow over at the other building?
It's an open house for the EMS,
Rescue squad?
the rescue squad, I believe, and I'm just seeing if I can find it. But
There's
I-
some flyers that they put out in the hallway this afternoon.
Oh, Sheffield. Thank you.
And I think it's also worth mentioning that the skate park opened, I believe, this week. Was it the beginning of this week?
Soft
soft
opening
opening.
unless you fall, and it's
We're gonna have a real opening at
There
some
will be a
point.
grand opening coming
A
soon.
grand opening coming soon, but that's a triumph, I think.
It's a very popular place.
Yeah,
Is that finally finished?
it is, and we're gonna
Yeah.
have the grand openings
Yeah,
coming.
there's one or two small items, but we just couldn't hold back the tide.
Oh, the fence had to come down.
Any other business?
Mr. Town Manager, tear down that wall. I don't have it.
Okay, move to adjourn in honor of Howard Wilcox. Passing.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Non-debatable. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And we are adjourned. Our next meeting, Scott.
Well, that's up to you. June 6th is the regularly scheduled one, 2 weeks from now.
So we're tentatively scheduling one for June 6th. If it's a slow time, we skip it. If there's a lot going on, we'll definitely have it.
Yeah, we'll probably have it, because I will bring the auditor tonight.
Oh, that's
Give it
right.
2 different days.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he's retiring now.
Oh, boy. Yeah,
He
this
is,
is
so
the
we're
last
gonna
time.
know he's still a CPA.
Yeah.
And,
Recording stopped.